At 3:02 a.m., my phone lit with an automatic notice from TidePass stating my transponder had been captured eastbound on the Whitlow Bridge while my Civic sat under the hacked-up sycamore outside our duplex on Ash Lane. 2 minutes later, my bank flagged a chip present charge at the Harbourview Marina parking kiosk, the exact card I keep buried in a zip pouch in my nightstand. By 3:11 a.m., a rideshare receipt hit my inbox thanking me for a generous tip from the Marina to the Laurel Oaks apartments on Baxter Street, a complex I only knew from glossy billboards showing smiling people on terraces that overlook a drainage ditch. We live in Holloway, Virginia, a mid-sized city that pretends to be coastal because the river widens enough at the edge of town to trick you into thinking you can smell the Atlantic. Our neighbourhood is a stitched-together patch of duplexes and small capes with porch flex year-round and Halloween inflatables that survive until Easter. You can bike to the dockside market for fish that tastes like victory on a grill, or you can get run over by a delivery truck on Gleason Avenue if you look at your phone too long. I run a small e-commerce store that sells lighting and trim to DIY landlords. When orders slump, I pick up handyman jobs for hanging doors or installing vanities, the kind of work that leaves everything on your body with a matching line of caulk. My wife is a pediatric oncology nurse at St. Agnes, a job that turns human beings into saints before they hit the parking garage, and she has always had the schedules that make marriages wobble, days that become nights that become trebly overtime, and text messages that read like gentle orders sent from the universe. We have a daughter who just turned 7 and thinks rivers count as oceans if you name them right. She was born early and keeps a rescue inhaler on a shelf we can both reach with our eyes closed. We carry health insurance that feels like a game where rules change during halftime, and we pay off a series of bills so old they stop sounding like money and start sounding like background noise. 2 false storms in a row took flesh from our roof. The second, one led to a home equity line of credit we swore we would never touch except for shingles. I have 2 credit cards and a notebook where every purchase lives as a tiny confession. We are generous to a fault and broke it in ways only generous people can explain. If you asked me to name the first wrong thing, I would pick the scent before I would pick the money. My wife wore a lightweight floral body spray when I met her, the kind that still floats in the hallway after you put your bag down. In June she adopted something heavy vanilla smoke, something musky that clung to the seats like a secret and told me a patient's mom had gifted the staff little bottles during nurse week, which I pretended to believe because I wanted the world to be that kind. A second phone started to appear on the console, a discount model with a spiderweb crack over the top corner. She said the volunteer coordinator asked for a private number for after-hours calls that didn't belong on her main line. Timesheets in our shared calendar multiplied like rabbits, and the green blocks labelled St. Agnes tilted into places where birthdays and dinners used to sit. We had been together long enough for me to feel change in my bones, but not long enough for me to tell the change to sit down and behave. The Whitlow Bridge topping killed the story I had been telling myself. TidePass only misread if you share plates with a ghost. I padded to the front window and pulled the curtain with 2 fingers. My Civic stared back at me with the same hooding from a snowstorm 3 winters ago. The sycamore swayed. I checked the Harbourview kiosk charge again, chip present, garage ticket printed. The rideshare confirmation showed a pickup time 3:12 a.m. Drop off 3:26 a.m. Driver Kevin with a 5-star average. Destination Laurel Oaks Apartments, Building F. I pressed a fingertip against the screen as if my nail could push the pixels back into a different shape. By 6, I had a yellow legal pad filled with dates and arrows as if order alone could defeat chaos. June 14th, 2:41 a.m. A similar TidePass crossing I had deleted in a hurry. June 23rd, Foundry Cafe on Baxter Street at 6:05 a.m. A charge I'd assumed was a treat after a night shift. July 3rd, a debit at Quick Lock Storage on Ames the same morning she told me she was napping at her sister's because our place felt too noisy for recovery. I went through my email and found 2 automated messages I had swiped away at school pickup. Welcome to Laurel Oaks Resident Portal and confirm your account for Baxter secure. I opened the first and saw an email address that looked like hers but with a dot inserted in the middle and an address worn by repeated typing, 781 Baxter Street, Unit 2B. The timestamp in the second email matched the first. She had created both accounts while I was in the parking lot at Ash Lane Elementary waiting for our daughter to exit a building that smelled like crayons and lemon cleaner. I didn't drive to Baxter Street. I made waffles that our daughter ate with her hands and white syrup off a chest I would protect with my entire life without being asked. My wife rolled in near 9, all body spray and end of shift eyes, and went straight to the shower that always runs a minute before the water heater decides to wake. She kissed my shoulder as she passed and thanked me for the waffles. She said a family had needed extra hand-holding. I nodded and watched the steam from the bathroom door thicken as if humidity could do the work of truth. I performed the dumbest, grimacing a suspicious spouse performs. I checked the odometer on her car and wrote it down. I confirmed our bank balances down to the pennies and took screenshots. I opened our HELOC portal and saw the checkbooks I had clicked last year that allows digital requests with e-signatures. The checkbooks of broker had code convenient. I turned it off and printed an authorization revocation, a piece of paper that looked like a relic. On my way back from the printer, the basement light flicked off and I had to feel my way through boxes of winter clothes and a bin of books we promised to donate. I stubbed my toe so hard I saw stars, and I stood with a hand on the fuse box until the pain took its breath back. A week later, the first reveal landed with perfect bureaucratic timing. A call came from Tide Bank's fraud department at lunch asking if I had meant to draw down $10,000 from our HELOC to be wired to an escrow account at the title company on Baxter. I had told the woman our line had authorization disabled. She told me the request had already closed because my digital signature looked impeccable. She read the email used on the form as proof. It matched the one in my inbox except for a dot. She issued a case number that felt like a voicemail from the future, TB-881,493. I asked for an immediate freeze and a new login. She obliged with a cheerfulness that made me want to lie down on the kitchen floor and drift through the day like a dust mote. I took the yellow pad to the dockside market that Saturday because that is where all gossip ends up disguised as fresh fish. I met my friend Lewis, who runs the market's back room and has eyes that flatten when someone is full of lies. He told me he had nothing to add except this. A man matching an unflattering description of my fears had been seen at the market buying a mixed bouquet on discount from the vendor who sits up next to the cod. Lewis said he only noticed because the man wore scrubs under a jacket, and the scrub said Laurel Oaks Radiology in stitched letters. That detail landed with an ugly resonance I could not pretend was unnecessary. Our radiology tech would know what a bridge looks like in a different light. I tried to be generous and confronted gently. I asked my wife if she could help me unwind a messy thing with bank emails because a dot in an address had caused mayhem. She shrugged like a person who believes shrugging is a containment strategy and said identity theft happens to everyone. She said she would have to pick up an extra weekend to make up for the time she would spend on hold with banks on my behalf. Later that night she turned her phone face down on the coffee table, which telegraphed exactly what it always telegraphs. Our block held its annual cookout the next afternoon, the one where the HOA president reads names off a clipboard and neighbours bring dishes they pretend are improvised. I've put my evidence in a manila folder because confrontation prefers tables and folding chairs. After the hot dogs and the obligatory prayer, I asked my wife if we could speak at the card table under Mrs. Chung's pop-up canopy because I had documents older than embarrassment. She said to stop being dramatic. I asked our next-door neighbour, a retired mail carrier named T.J., who knows more about addresses than Google Maps, to stand nearby because eyes help with truth. I laid out the TidePass notices, the bank case number, the resident portal email with an address at Laurel Oaks, and the quick lock storage auto-pay enrollment under a card we do not own. Conversations around us dimmed without dying. The HOA president made loud excuses about checking the recycling bins. T.J. cleared his throat and said he had seen my wife's car twice last month idling near the Laurel Oaks mailbox wall, which he recognized because he subbed the route in March when the regular carrier broke his wrist. He said she had waited for a man in scrubs to bring her a padded envelope and then driven away hugging it like a football. It was the kind of neutral observation that hurts worse because the witness doesn't want to ruin anyone's life. My wife stared at the documents and said exhaustion makes people skip steps, that she had visited a friend at Laurel Oaks and picked up a package because the lobby kept getting robbed, that hospitals ask for miracles on schedules human flesh does not accept, that a HELOC glitch is why banks are fraud departments. She reminded me I was the one who loses receipts and blames Amazon. She did not reach for the papers. She did not meet my eyes. In that second I chose a path that felt both petty and necessary. I opened a separate checking account at the credit union on Fenwick, redirected my pay there, and set an internal note on our joint accounts that any transfers over $200 required both signatures in person. The clerk slid a laminated card toward me with a number to call if anyone argued, and I put it in my wallet like a small sword. The next twist came in a letter that sat in a UPS store box for 3 days because my wife forgot to check it. The manager knows me from the years I've shipped light fixtures, and he called to say a certified mail item in my name was growing lonely. I drove over during a lull in orders and signed. Inside, a parking citation from the Laurel Oaks office, complete with 2 grainy photos of my Civic in a file lane at 3:29 a.m. The citation had been issued to Unit 2B as a courtesy for the resident, with a courtesy fine that landed on my side of the scale. The letter was addressed to my full name, C/O Laurel Oaks Resident Services, Box 312. I stood at the counter with the papers and realized boxes can be used to build either houses or illusions depending on who holds the hammer. I hired a lawyer because paper works better when it has a header. Her name is Shaw. She works above a deli on Harper, and her office smells like toner and dill pickles. She told me to assume nothing, to document everything, to freeze the HELOC and file a police report if I wanted anyone to take the forgery seriously. She handed me a list of labs certified for legal paternity testing with chain of custody protocols in case biology became a question I couldn't live without answering. She suggested I send my wife a balanced, dated letter inviting cooperation if medical records hinted at anything that would tie us forever to a question mark. I left with a retainer lighter than fear and a folder heavier than bone. The next unexpected blow came from the pediatrician's office. A nurse called to confirm our daughter's appointment and, while scheduling, casually mentioned that prenatal vitamins were being refilled on my wife's profile and would I like them sent to the same pharmacy on Gleason. She said the generic brand often made people queasy. I wrote down the name of the pills with a shaking hand. I told myself plenty of reasons existed for a nurse to take vitamins without implying a new life. Then I found the patient portal note we both had access to because one day a receptionist clicked a checkbox linking our accounts. The note referenced to referral to Laurel Oaks Radiology for a pelvic ultrasound with a set of instructions that included the name of a tech whose signature resembled the scribble on the envelope T.J. had seen. I asked myself whether to demand clarity or to pretend reality would return to a shape I recognized. Would you order the legal DNA test immediately and risk turning your kitchen into a courtroom? Or would you wait and hope she walked into the lab of her own will so the result would feel less like a verdict and more like a decision? I scheduled the test for 3 weeks out at Holloway Diagnostics, case number HD-3719. I notified my wife in writing, neutral and precise, offering 3 times slots and an address with parking instructions because small kindnesses cost little. I wrote that the test was not an accusation but a boundary that would save us both from stories shaped by fear. I offered to pay and included the chain of custody guidelines so no one would later argue about labels. I signed with my full name as if the law could teach my marriage punctuation. Work kept me tethered to living. Orders for matte black sconces surged after a HGTV show filmed a house on the other side of Whitlow. I drove my van to the postal annex on Lark Street, the one with a mural of a blue heron taller than a truck, unloaded boxes until my elbows clicked. The kid who runs the evening shift asked if I needed help with palette wrap and told me he liked the way I always wrote addresses like a former calligrapher. I did not correct him because it felt good to be a person who does one thing cleanly. On the way home I stopped for a soda. The clerk at the corner bodega told me, as if he had been saving the story, that he had seen my wife and a man in scrubs in the back parking lot 3 nights in a row, trading bags that looked like lunch and laughing in the way coworkers laugh when they discover they like the way the other person laughs. He had no reason to tell me. He had every reason not to. I thanked him because I didn't know what else manners were for. The house became a place where silence and routine battled. Our daughter practiced spelling on the rug and I said words slowly so she could hear where letters changed sound. My wife slept on the couch sometimes, claiming not to want to wake me with her shifts, and sometimes on the bed while I fit myself into the couch's bow like a penalty. We showed up at church because the music helps even those who don't believe sing through hard weeks. The rumors arrived in whispers that pretended to be prayers. I stood next to a deacon at the coffee inn and watched him overfill his cup twice in a row without realizing because awkwardness makes everything heavy. The second public scene was not my idea, but it was my opportunity. Ash Lane Elementary hosted a family literacy night where kids made paper owls and adults feigned enthusiasm for phonics. I took my envelope because nothing makes me braver than fluorescent light on gym floors. I asked the principal if I could speak with 2 staff members in the hallway who knew our family well, not to damage reputations but to secure an adult record that I wasn't spinning storms out of fog. I showed them the TidePass pings, the Laurel Oaks citation, the bank case file, the prenatal notes, the storage auto pay receipt with the last 4 of a card I did not recognize. One of the teachers dated a man who works maintenance at Laurel Oaks. She confirmed Unit 2B's lock had been changed twice in 2 months and the lock showed a nurse badge as the authorized requester. She said the badge name was my wife's maiden name, a detail that meant nothing to strangers and everything to me. I didn't want to see pity living in the eyes of a person who taught my child to read, but there it was. I closed our joint credit cards with a calm that felt like surgery. The bank assigned closure confirmation numbers that sounded like train schedules. CC-100 18,713 and CC-100 19,287. I locked our credit reports at all 3 bureaus and made a spreadsheet to track which notification arrived when, because paperwork has always been my way. I updated the emergency contact form at school to include my mother and our neighbour TJ. And the secretary told me she appreciates parents who don't make her guess who will answer if she dials a 2. I moved copies of everything into a cloud folder with a name boring enough to survive snooping. I stopped sleeping and started making lists of lists. I can't say which twist cut deepest. Maybe it was the forged notarization that appeared in our HELOC portal despite the freeze, a scan of my signature performing a decent impression of familiarity. Maybe it was the quick lock storage manager calling to ask whether I wanted to upgrade to a 10x10 because demand had spiked, and his script forcing him to add that we could store furniture and baby items if we liked. Maybe it was the pastor gently mentioning that couples sometimes move through temporary lands of confusion and that bridges exist that lead back home if you don't set them on fire. Maybe it was the night I pulled into Laurel Oaks myself and sat in my van across from Building F, watching the windows for signs of my own life being lived by someone who had not asked my permission. In one apartment a TV flickered blue, in another a plant leaned like a person trying to hear. I left without walking to any door because I knew I would not be able to stop my hands from knocking. 2 days before the DNA test appointment, Storm washed the sky clean and we ate spaghetti on the porch. She said she had to review a schedule with her supervisor at St. Agnes. I said nothing because my words had become grenades no matter how gently I rolled them across the table. At 9:17 p.m., the ring cam we never used pinged with motion. I opened the app out of habit and watched our porch light catch a figure leaning in just beyond the glass, a man scrubbed under a jacket, a bouquet from the dockside vendor in hand, and a small padded envelope tucked in the crook of his elbow. He knocked. He waited. He looked toward the street as if someone had promised to arrive. The clip caught the faint reflection of my wife's shadow in the hallway and then nothing but the quiet of a failure unpacked in silence. I downloaded the clip and saved it as if it contained a useful lesson, though all it did was confirm what humans can do to each other with a door between them. My wife did not show for the test. The clinic swabbed me without complaint and labelled my envelope with HD-3719 as if dignity could be barcoded. The nurse told me the other party had 2 weeks to present for chain of custody. I nodded like someone hearing menu options. I bought a coffee I couldn't drink and drove loops around Holloway until the gas needle complained. The judge in my head asked whether I had done enough to be considered reasonable. The answer was maybe, which is the moral middle most men live inside. Shaw filed for temporary custody orders and a financial restraining order the next morning. She added exhibits like a person rebuilding a bridge with planks you hope can carry a truck, the toll pings, the Laurel Oaks citation, the forged HELOC attempt, the UPS box mailer, the ring cam clip, the pediatric office note, the chain of custody receipt, the credit closure confirmations, a screenshot from my calendar showing pickup times by the minute. She reminded me to brief before hearings because a mirror ruins arguments faster than logic does. I stood in her office and marvelled at how much of her life fits in a cheap banker's box. My wife moved into Unit 2B quietly in July, leaving behind a toothpaste tube I still squeeze because my muscles miss our old choreography. We agreed on a custody rotation that made clocks into rulers. She sent a single long email about a health diagnosis I won't describe here because it isn't mine to parade. It explained fear, not behaviour. She wrote that she had ended the entanglement with the tech at the radiology centre before it wrecked every room. She said she would not submit to a DNA test because the assumption itself bruised her. I responded with 2 paragraphs about paperwork and 2 about kindness, the latter mostly for me because better men become ugly in a way you can smell. We had a civil exchange about school supplies that made me proud and then sad. The community reacted in the way communities do, little knives wrapped in casserole dishes. People asked if I needed anything with the tone of people who want to be told exactly how to prove they are good. T.J. started mowing my side of the strip between our driveways without asking. Mrs. Chum left a bag of mandarins and a page of handwritten custody tips gleaned from 3 divorces in her extended family. The dockside market guy slipped me the mixed bouquet that went unsold and told me sometimes flowers are better on a desolate porch. Now the aftermath stretches across days that feel like practice. I make our daughter's lunch and draw a small bird in the corner of a napkin because 7-year-olds collect rituals. I work my orders and wipe my counters, then answer emails from people who believe hardware is a metaphor for stability. I attend HR meetings at St. Agnes as a witness when Sean needs to verify time cards against call logs. The hospital's compliance officer runs the numbers on a program called Sync Shift, and the data says my wife did more swapping than anyone in her unit for 3 months. The supervisor confirms policy violations in careful words. I don't gloat because winning ruins more than it fixes. I have learned that a man can live in a house and not feel at home because he spends all his time counting. I have learned that a face on a ring count can feel more intimate than a hand on your back if the time man is lined up next to the right receipt. I have learned to write letters to my future self with subject lines like "Don't text tonight" and "Be kind at drop-off." I have learned the precise weight of a child's backpack on Thursday afternoons and the way pine pollen smears on a windshield in April if you let it. I still hear the first ping sometimes like a taunt. 3:02 a.m. TidePass, Whitlow Bridge eastbound. In the summer, when birds get stupid at dawn, they go feverish on the sycamore and pepper the sidewalk with songs and droppings. I stand by the window and watch a few ride the backwash of wind off the river and settle on the pole where the streetlight did the flicker for years before the city replaced it. In the pause dark between the old bulb dying and the new one catching, I see a line of red LED numbers mark a license plate that belongs to me but acts like it doesn't. I picture a barrier arm rising for someone who never learned how to pay the right tolls with the right coins. I imagine a man in scrubs with a bouquet and an envelope realizing the porch he stands on is a kind of courtroom. Sometimes, when the morning comes clean and nothing pings, I convince myself that birds choose their wires for reasons that have nothing to do with us, and that the river isn't pretending to be an ocean at all. It's just moving forward because it doesn't know how not to.